Hello, I'm Nancy Araki. I'm a Sansei born in San Francisco. When the war started, my family moved from Mendocino County to join all the other family members at Esparto, California. And from there, we all went into Merced Assembly Center and then got shipped off to Amachi, Colorado. And we, because circumstances, we left the camp rather early to then go to Utah. But from Utah, with vigilante activities and all, it was safer that our family then went back into another camp, which is Topaz, Utah.
Hello, I'm Richard Murakami. I was born in Florida, California, which is 7 miles from Sacramento. Was born on my grandparents' grape farm. My father believed that the whole family should be together, so he took his brother and 3 sisters, and we all moved to Florida, except for his older sister. His older sister did not go with us because my uncle got picked up by the FBI in December 7th, I think December 8th or 9th anyway. So she didn't want to leave because she said that if she left, my uncle would not know where they are. So all of our families, we moved to Florida and lived near my uncle's house. And from there, we were sent to Marysville, an assembly center, and then at Tootie Lake. And then after the so-called loyalty questionnaire, we went to Jerome, and then from Jerome we went to Hard Mountain.
I remember a little bit of Amachi. I started kindergarten there, and so there's some remembrances of the school being on the hilltop, and then. Other than that, I remember when we did leave the camps on the Greyhound bus. And then I remember living in Spanish Fork, Utah area, and that's where I then started first grade, and how scary that was because, there were no other Japanese around there, and having to take the school bus on my own and all. And I remember that, but more frighteningly was the vigilante activity that eventually occurred with people driving by and throwing bricks. And in that, the bricks, the window was shattered, and actually, I was sleeping right by the window, but my mother had used a monk's cloth as a curtain, so that kind of prevented any real bad injury or anything. And from that, my father, reporting it to the authorities and all, but ultimately, with the young family, it was just decided it'd be better to go back into the camp. So we did that. One of the strongest feelings as a child was, and I remember asking my parents and my grandmother, why are so many big people crying? I mean, I remember that vividly. And so they would try to explain as best they can all the various things. And so that was a real troublesome thing to me. I knew adults cried because I had gone through a funeral of my grandfather, but now, just walking by the barracks and hearing this was rather disturbing.
Once somebody asked me at an event about a life in camp for me as a 10-year-old, and I told him I had fun in camp. And I told him the reason I had fun in camp is because my parents tried to keep life as normal as possible for us while we're there. They didn't complain about anything. They didn't say woes or things like that. So that's why I wore this shirt, come on shirt. because they had to come on, not me. They had to come on.
My dad, whenever he'd come back, and he was a really kind of a really social organizer, I guess. And so he would get all the kids out the block and we'd all go out into the desert area, and he would, you know, create activities like having like a junior Olympics, or having, you know, hunting for arrowheads or whatever, that kind of thing. And I remember one time we were out there when all of a sudden one of the famous topaz dust storms occurred. And so he kind of herded all of us, and then we all were supposed to walk straight forward. And I remember just kind of trudging with my head down. And what was so incredible was that I thought, oh my gosh, how could this side of my face hurt so badly with all the sand? And this side, there's no, you know, it was a normal feeling. And that type of, you know, experience kind of remains with you.
My brother said, took my mother to Oregon to visit some old family friends. On the way back, they decided to stop at Tootie Lake. And my brother said, as soon as they saw the side of Tootie Lake, my mother started to cry.
Yeah.
And she would not stop crying until he left. He said he decided to leave right away. And so then, and I didn't know that until 2016. They went in 1972. My brother did not tell me until 2016. So 71 years later, after leaving camp, I found out that, you know, my mother really had suffered. And we never discussed camp in our family. There was only one time when my niece interviewed us, but I forgot what it was about. My mother didn't say anything or indicate anything where she was very stressed and, you know, went through trauma. We lived in a 20 by 24 room, and the only thing separating us between, well, was my father hung a blanket in the middle of the room, and I would go to try to sleep at night, and my mother and father used to talk almost every night. Mm. I still remember my father saying, we're United States citizens, we're going to be out of here in 6 months. Because when a country is at war, they need farmers to grow the food, not knowing why we got, one of the reasons why we got put in. Okay, and also during the first year into the lake, the government offered to let the family out to go farm. You know where? North Dakota.
North Dakota.
Father said, North Dakota.
Yeah.
He said, if you're going to send us there, we need to be subsidized. The government said 1 year. My father said, no, 2 years, because I cannot learn the land in 1 year. Government said no, so my father said no.
You know, there were three things that were it was spoken, but also practiced by my parents. And that was, you know, we knew that always do the very best you can. Always be honest, and always give back to the community. Seems like those are kind of like the three family precepts or something, you know, that we grew up with. And which I'm kind of grateful for. It wasn't like always make A's or anything, but always do the very best you can.
My father was not a communicator. I'm a Murakami man. I never say I love you to the family.
Oh.
I hug and kiss and tell everybody else how much I like them. But family, I didn't do that.
Oh.
And so then at the family gathering, I told them that, you see, my father was the same way. My grandfather was the same way. My father never said, I love you, or anything like that that I can remember in my lifetime. but I know that his actions showed, when I really think about it, his actions showed how much he cared about us. So that's why when the war started, he wanted the family to be together and we moved up to Florida. So when we came back from camp, my father never said anything about camp once. And in family, we never did really discuss it.
The one thing I remember about my mom is that after the war, she all of a sudden, she remembered us getting really excited. You know, it was our first time being out in San Francisco, and leaves were falling from the trees that line California Street. And we were so excited saying, oh, autumn leaves, you know, picking up these, she was saying, these awful looking brown leaves. But as children, this is the first time we saw autumn leaves. And she thought, oh my gosh, the kids really, you know, there's a void here. They lost out a part of their lives. So with that, she decided that she would try to make up all of the lost experiences of being in the camps, being isolated, to, you know, for us. And so, my gosh, she took us to every parade, every new exhibition that was there, to the art museums, to the zoo, to everywhere. I mean, you know, when the Freedom Train came by to the Bay Area, she really had us all packed up to go through and experience that. So she did her might to really give us back what experiences we didn't have because we were in camp. And then one time, this was one of the first Veterans Day parades in San Francisco that she took us. And we were there standing on the sidewalk while the parade was coming. And this man, this Caucasian man, came and yelled at my mother saying, you know, the Jap word, and, you know, get out of here, you're the enemy, and all of that. And my mom stood up to him and saying, you know, no, I'm an American and my children are American and we have the right to be here to celebrate Veterans Day, you know? And that was to me amazing because I think that was one of the first times I saw her stand up. That, you know, in the founding days of the museum, you know, nobody really, I mean, this is something I think we need to document are the founders and the ideas that they brought to the table. I mean, it's when you really think about because they were the older Nikkei generation. And when you think about, they're the ones that came back and started the little Tokyo, becoming, you know, bringing that together, bringing the community together and some of the activities and all that. And so it really, for me, it was just a real privilege to sit among them and listen to how they thought. And it was very quick that it was obvious there were those who were thinking in building a building, and then people like me saying, hey, it doesn't matter if you had a building or not, unless you got some programming going on. And so, you know, have to be the program chairman, right? But then you have a program committee and a lot of the discussion going on. What is this museum? And it is going to be a national museum. So what does that mean to be a national museum? You know, we knew that there were voices still that we needed to capture through the camp experience and all. But we also knew that ultimately there was going to be a collective thing that needed to happen. Because it isn't just, because unfortunately we all being people, you know, we all being human beings, sometimes it was the feeling like my camp was worse than your camp. So therefore I suffered more kind of attitude that was coming out, or my camp was better than your camp kind of thing. It was just really an odd thing that was kind of cropping up. And we were hearing this. So we said, you know, into the future, you really got to think in terms that it is all of our collective experience, because that's what our children are going to end up understanding, not so much our individual kind of experience. So that's when we start to think about that and having the first all camp summit. And that was in 2002. We got a visit one day. Irene called me and said, Nancy, come on down to the collections at such and such time, because we're going to have a visitor from Arkansas. You know, Ruby Takanishi is bringing the head of the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation. That's when I first met the wonderful Sybil Jordan Hampton. Ruby had sent her a thank you card or something on a card that our museum had produced the season before, showing that those, the mural, and you know, and as note cards, we were selling that. And apparently she used that as a thank you note. And that's the first time that Sybil knew about that there was anything to do with the camps in the state of Arkansas. So she needed to come, because to her, this was just kind of like horrendous, you know, like how come she didn't know about this? And that started the relationship and the idea that she wanted to do a conference, because for her, this whole experience would, for our Arkansans, show that, you know, this kind of prejudice is, and is not just a black and white issue.
The volunteers, I don't know how many volunteers said they wanted to go. And this included volunteer leadership. So I'm waiting for them to do something. And nothing happens. And nobody's doing anything to organize anything. You know, I just didn't understand that. So I just took it upon myself one day and I called up Yamato and discussed that with them. And this conference is coming up. And I asked them if they were willing to put a tour together. They said, okay.
That's right.
Yeah. So I
remember now.
So then I contacted the volunteers who thought I were interested. And because I was the one that contacted her, I became the kind of the lead for the museum people. And we have museum people, we have other people that came. There were a whole busload we had. And I was surprised we had that many. But anyway, so it was it was put together by them, and they included things like, when we went to Camp Shelby on a Monday when the museum was not open, but she got there, whoever her contacts were, got them to open up the museum for us at Camp Shelby. And we were probably one of the first people that went to the World War II Museum in New Orleans, because there was a JA guy there that was helping them put that together. They had a little section on the 442. So we went to that. We went to the Civil War grounds and all that. And it turned out to be a really good tour. And
Skip says, well, how many people do you think is going to come, Nancy? You know, for sure it's going to be 750 plus, for sure. I know it's going to be for sure 750, because, you know, that's usually a good solid number that we've seen in all kinds of stuff. But I said, but it could go up to about 1,000. And he'd go, Well, you know, basically the Arkansas was expecting really 250 people. An outspoken person in LA just really got very angry because she could not sign up for the tour, because by this time, you know, Arkansas was taking care of all the registrations. Said, no, this art already sold up. And I said, no, you can't be saying that. This is probably the most important part regardless of the wonderful sessions we have and all. But for the people coming, the most important part is to go to the campsite. So we got to figure out a way where we get everybody, you know, to the campsite.
A little girl in the 50s. I played here when there were still buildings, when they were falling down, and so I've come back too.
This is fascinating, not only from a historical point of view, because of all of the kind of strange developments that have occurred in the Delta throughout history, but also, of course, the parallels to our own time and constitutional law right now are frightening, distressing, sad.
Yeah, I had just turned 4. So I'm of an age where I had a life. I had a life before, which I remember very well. And so it had this big effect on me because I didn't know what I was doing here and what happened to my life. So it's different for everybody. Yeah, there's a whole saga involved in here.
Okay, we can go on and have a picture made right here. 62 years ago. 62 years ago. I'm now 91. Oh, wow. I knew her as Miss Wakennight. She was my 3rd grade teacher, and this is what she looked like. Now, this is our class robe. Oh, one of them. But I'm not going to give you that. That's the only one I got. Okay. I'll make one and send it to you. Okay. Now, I did go into teaching, but it was college. See, she was ahead of me. No. I think elementary school teachers should get paid more than college teachers. So I've retired in Hilo, and I've invited her to come and visit me. She'll have a free apartment. Oh. Well, it was a wonderful experience. See my Mr. Ellington.
It's not a make amends or nothing like that, because you can't do it. When the water goes by the bridge, it's gone. You take what's coming. But it is a good opportunity. I've made a lot of friends. I've met a lot of folks. Been exposed to a lot of things that I've never been exposed to because it never happened. So it is a place of historical significance.
I was 23. I just got married and I had one daughter, and she was 2 months old. She's coming. That's why I brought her. Well, that was all barracks, but now it's just bare land. Yeah.
Probably go all this whole street by now.
Yeah, well, believe it or not, I didn't know this was here.
Oh, you did?
I sure did.
Oh, okay. Now you know.
So far, just meeting people from all over. I was just talking to somebody from Denver, talking to someone in New York, at Arbor, and I said, why'd you guys come here? Same reason. It's a historical event, and we're making history here, and I think this is why we're here. Plus, a personal reason to kind of, those that was at Rohwer or at Jerome, just want to see what's happened to where they used to live.
I think it's good for us to remember this so we don't repeat the error in the future. You know, as of now, we got Arab Americans under fire for looking like Arab Americans. You know, it's not their fault. That's the way they were born. The Almighty created them that way, right? And they all came here for a reason, to have new opportunities. And I don't want to see somebody else go through this again.
He might have been one that went swimming with us. I don't know if you're familiar with that. There's a canal right down at that woods line.
A little bit out of my range. I used to live over here, and I stuck trying to.
Yeah, it don't matter where you live, because y'all could walk.
Not this boy. I didn't know how to swim.
Well, we all, we'd go swimming over.
It wasn't
All
deep
of
enough
us
to swim, no way.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
I studied American history, and remnants of World War II was there, but not this. This is news to me.
Yeah, because even during the war, we were here. I know what you guys went through. I really know what you guys.
Yeah.
This is the building they were talking about, I think.
The auditorium?
Yeah.
My uncle helped build that. Yeah.
See, it used to get so hot that we would make dress without waist. See, it was long torso-like.
We're going to pick cotton.
Oh, when them cotton balls get rotten, you can't pick very much cotton.
I have a scissor in the bus.
Well, there you go.
Oh, thank you. You're
Then you
so
get-
kind.
Now don't get stuck, because you remember these things? Look at,
Oh,
that's what people got chewed up with when they were picking.
oh.
This is the last campaign in Italy. Bill Imamoto, he was our medic. And he was the first one to get killed on Mount Belvedere. And then Kishi was the second one. And we had to carry him down the mountain, 4 of us.
See how that crack in there? Before, all four sides were laid on the ground and put it back. And done that twice. And we were continuously begging for, my dad was continuously begging for money to, like, that part to fall off, and they have to probably do every weekend, try to get someone to restore the property.
It's been a long, interesting journey. I think this is healing for a lot of people here to come back, and it sort of brings closure for a lot of families.
one of the most important outcome, and it reached one of the early goals of the institution, the museum, was that through the really wonderful and great work that was done by Allison and her colleague from the University of Arkansas, their teacher training created a group of amazing, dedicated teachers who just took on the whole theme and all, and developed a curriculum that was so good and so adaptable that the state of Arkansas, their Department of Education, the State Department of Education, adopted the curriculum. Part.
Just putting up ACC to me, because that when my free time I would walk through there and people would be there watching, looking at all of this exhibit displayed and everything else. To me, was the best. And I think there were other volunteers that said the same thing that I did about the ACC exhibit was tops number one. And then after that were the students' presentations.
I think one of the most important things is the leaving behind of experiences and memory. And to do it from a first person voice, and to have young people or other people who haven't had that experience, be there to partake the information, to interface with the people. I think that to me is one of the most important part, whether, like in Arkansas, whether you were part of the inmates, or, even remember Farmer, what was his name? Farmer John, really tall man. And so as a young kid, he would come over from his side of the fence into Jerome and became friends with some of the Japanese Americans. And he continues to be a rice farmer. And so he first showed up at the All Camp Summit, and he brought little bags of Arkansas rose rice just to give. Like even this farmer had a story to tell. And you begin to appreciate it in a bigger picture, even one of our volunteers, dear Jean, she just couldn't go on the pilgrimage. Her husband and son went, but she herself, the one who was incarcerated there, could not. She could not, but she could only stay in Little Rock. And just listening to why or because or whatever, you start to understand how, my gosh, this is really the emotions, that this whole experience has kind of imprisoned some of us. And without sharing and talking about it, you can't get released from it, right? For some people. And for other people, it's to be there to see it, and it's a kind of a release.
Before I became a volunteer, when the Rohwer had an article that said museum's going to have an exhibit on the concentration camps, they call them regional relocation camps. You know what I said? Because we never discussed it at home. I said, what the hell are they doing that for? Then I never really thought about things that, about camp. But we need to tell our story. And our story, starting with the essays till now. And if we don't tell our story, nobody else is going to. And I really think the pilgrimages and everything else are very important because of my experience in going to those. And when I see all these young people come to the pilgrimages, and I say, they're going to keep the stories alive.
And I think it's really important that we also be able to connect what the lessons from our story connected to what's going on today. With the immigration, with the separation of the young children and their parents, the incarceration of those kids. You got to speak up for them.
Hello, everybody.
Hi.
And thank you all for coming. I want to just start off by thanking the Tadaima Japanese American Memorial Pilgrimages. Shout out to Kimiko, Hanako, Aaron, and Royce for programming everything, Mia Russell, and all the rest of the committee for their leadership and their creativity. Because again, if you've been able to watch the very beginning 9 weeks ago, this has been an amazing feat. And this last weekend is proving to be the cherry on top of the entire ice cream sundae. So my name is Clement Tanami, and I work at the Japanese American National Museum for as long as both of these people have been at the museum. They are two of my mentors. One is a staff person, Nancy Araki, who was there before I got there. She was actually one of the first people who welcomed me when I got my job in 1992. She was, as soon as I met her, she was a friend, an ally, and just so warm and welcoming. And really, when I asked for advice or suggestions, she had so many, but she also provided the freedom and the ability to explore and find for myself the answers to many of the questions. So that, I'm always eternally grateful for that. Richard, for his very outspoken behavior as a volunteer and his way of getting things done. We're always appreciative of Richard for asking the hard questions and just being there present all the time. So, and he's been there since 1994 too. So it's just been an amazing experience for myself to now be able to present them for all the people on YouTube to see and those visiting the virtual pilgrimage. So I'm just going to start with some questions. And if any of the visitors on our channel have questions, please feel free to enter them in the chat. And I'm going to start, that video that was produced by JANM as a result of Nancy is sort of the ghost manager of the project. She never says that she's done anything, but she is the leader of the project. And of course, with Allison Nakamoto and volunteers like Ken Hamamura, all just a tireless group of people. They're able to do this. But Nancy is the one with the bullwhip. She's making sure everything gets done. But the video is so full of, there's a lot of gratitude. There's a lot of connections. There's a lot of emotions. And so I just wanted to throw that out to you. I don't know if you've all seen that video in a while. What are the kind of feelings and emotions that you got when you were able to watch that? Nancy?
Well, certainly it brings back a lot of memories, and you're right. I mean, and the memories include not just seeing the people who had come out to partake, but the memories go back to really the hard work that a lot of the staff members and the volunteers did in order to launch such a project, and also obviously the support. None of Arkansas would have happened without really the support given by Sybil Jordan Hampton, and as the president of the Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation at that time. And then she coupled us up with the University of Arkansas. But for the museum itself to be part of the players, we had a real strong core group. We worked as a team. And so within the team, you know, very obviously the education portion was led off by Allison Nakamoto. And then we had from the curatorial staff, and then the communications area and the media. I mean, we worked as a team, and sometimes, you know, people didn't have to come to some of the meetings, but really, I would say I have to also bring in two other names because they were very core to us, and that would be Lloyd Inoue and Art Hansen. Both of them were our scholar advisors. And actually, we really appreciated them in multiple ways. But all in all, you know, it took a lot of teamwork. And as somebody said one time long ago, long before even the museum, in another organization that I was with, says, you know, it's actually in the planning that you really get a lot from, because you have to think about all kinds of, all the questions, and then, you know, and all of the resources that you have. So I don't know. I think I forgot what your question was.
well, I see what you're doing, Nancy. You're giving credit to everybody else, and that's typical Nancy. So I'm sure everyone is very appreciative, but we know that. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the emotion we wear on our sleeves because we know it was a very emotional project. Richard, how about you?
Well, what I remember the most is the attendance, the number of people that we have. It was not only a national conference, but it was international because we had people from Japan and all over and we have, I swear, we probably had almost everybody from every state in the United States there. I mean, it was really a great thing, and I was really pleased that we had such a big crowd. And one of the things that impressed me a lot is the students and the program they had, because I concentrated on that more because I was working with Carol Komatska on that. And so that sort of, you know, enjoyed a lot. But I guess that was a kind of the start of when I really gained a great deal of respect for the staff at the Japanese American National Museum. They're dedicated people, and they really serve with a passion. And whenever I can say that, I'm going to say that to everybody that I know, because a great staff. And there's a guy named Clement.
Yeah.
No, we're not going there.
And you know, and I kind of, well, several of us volunteers, old timers, I've been there for 26 years. We say, you know what? We don't know what the museum would have been if Clement was not there.
Okay, we're gonna cut that off.
And so, you know, that's the memories I have of the memories I have is about the people that were there and the great job that staff did. And I want to thank them for that.
Yeah. So I want to echo that. Like Nancy, I mean, again, to me, Life Interrupted was such an enormous project to facilitate 1,300 people. You did need an entire staff. And that video that you saw, created by our now Emmy Award-winning media arts staff, with music performed by now Grammy Award-winning Quetzal, you know, illustrates the talent of the people involved, but also the depth of collaboration of all the people. There were curators did a lot of the interviewing.
Yes.
And we installed 8 exhibitions in Arkansas. We had to travel all those exhibitions to Arkansas for this conference. So it was an amazing feat. But enough of that. let's. I have another question. So, this is for Nancy.
Oh dear.
You've worked at a lot of nonprofit organizations, and you've started a lot of other, your history goes way back. The museum is just the last one. What was it about museums that you were so intrigued by, as opposed to, some of the other research projects and history projects?
I didn't get the question. You mean you're asking?
What was it about a museum that was so much, that absorbed so much of your life's work, as opposed to a historical research project or just more community-based work? What was it about the museum?
Wow, that's hard to interpret, because in a lot of ways, having the privilege of getting involved at the ground level of thinking about a depository, actually, it would be. And it comes out of the time that I spent with visual communications, and it got to a point where Linda Mabalit and I were heading up that organization in 1980. And we were doing a lot of visual documentation, mainly photographic, as well as creating media products, marketing media products for groups like Cairo and other organizations. But in during that time, it was also when we got to know the veterans, the World War II veterans, and started to do a lot of history documentation, because this is about the time where we were able to, excuse me, the MIS veterans were able to start talking about their stories. I mean, they were under lid, or they were, I guess by law, they couldn't reveal what their experience was about for about 30 years. And so it was through that experience of working with them and helping to develop exhibitions and for them that I got involved in the idea of some kind of museum or a repository, educational repository. And that's, ultimately got linked in with Bruce Kaji, who was head of the Merit Savings Bank, who also was at that time thinking about developing a museum. And so that coming together. So in a way, I just kind of went with the flow maybe, but at the same time, the importance of capturing, documenting, and presenting, and especially realizing how much, Niseis were now at that edge. I think when we started, there was like, I remember finding this out, that there were actually 60 historic Iseis still living at that time. Now, that was going to just disappear. And so it was so important that we capture as much as we can of the Niseis, who could still talk about their Issei parents and their experience, but we got to capture it now so that we could preserve it for future generations. And I guess that's what I got into, if that's the question.
And for the audience, Nancy and Richard have not been prepared with any of the questions prior.
For sure.
So that just shows you how Nancy is she's very good. She's together and she's sharp as a tack. And I appreciate, I think, I appreciate your answer. I really do feel like, this is a community-based museum, and it was made by people like you and some of the leadership, like you mentioned. And so in that sense, it's very unique in how it does its work. So again, I credit you for a lot of that, and I appreciate that. And Richard, what was it that interested you about a museum?
Well, see, I knew that before I retired, I was taking classes and everything else, and he used to always say, prepare for your retirement.
Yeah.
So I knew I was going to volunteer somewhere. There are 10,000 places you could volunteer. But one day, my cousin Barbara came in. She said, you know how to play with strings? I said, yeah. So they had a string festival. You know, with
Yeah.
string you make bridges and various things, you know. So they had a
Yeah.
string festival, so I went there. And I'm one of those guys that when I go anywhere, let's see, I used to manage by walking around, which means I look around everybody else to see what everybody's doing. And then when I saw David and Margaret Masuoka, I knew them before I volunteered in the museum. I knew that David was a doctor in pharmacy. When I saw David and Margaret working so hard, and they were selling plants, I said, you know what? If David and Margaret could work that hard, there must be something about this museum.
Yeah.
So that day I signed up to be a volunteer.
Yay.
And I'm glad I did that. And you know, the first few people I met were Mochizuki and you know, people like that. My first exhibit was the America's concentration camp.
Yeah.
And so you know, like I said before, I was one of those people who said, why are they doing a exhibit about the concentration camps or relocation centers? But then once I started volunteering there, I turned around 180%, and I believe I'm a devoted
yes
volunteer, and I really appreciate and like doing that. So that's the reason why I became a volunteer, because I've been doing community service work since 1969. So, and I'm just really happy with the museum and volunteers and staff.
Okay, thank you. And you know, I could keep asking questions all day, but there are some questions from the people who actually watch, so I appreciate that. The chat, if you guys, I don't know if you have seen the chat, Nancy or Richard, but a lot of people are, you know, shouting out saying, hi Richard, hi Nancy, good to see you guys. A lot of old staff and a lot of volunteers and just friends of the community. But the first question I have is from John Tonai, son of Mary and Min Tonai. What do you consider to be your favorite contribution to our community? That's a John Tonai question, not mine. And then you can think about that too, Richard. What is your favorite contribution? That's a hard one.
Yeah, that's a very hard one. I mean, you know, I just consider myself just a very, very privileged person to be able to have this experience of being, you know, part of the Japanese American National Museum from the beginning. Gosh, maybe, I mean, one of the greatest experience to me was to go up to Wyoming and to be able to oversee the bringing down of the barracks. I think I have to say that because it was just one of those very early types of discussion that we had with the founding volunteers. And part of it was like, okay, so if we're going to build a museum, what are we going to exhibit? And what's the important parts of the Japanese American exhibition or Japanese American museum? I mean, in order to have a Japanese American museum, what would be those elements? And of course, one of them for the World War II experience would have been a barrack. So, you know, when Karen Ishizuka was the curator for the America's Concentration Camp exhibition, the part of it, I guess part of it, they decided that, yeah, maybe we should get a barracks. And I was asked to be the project manager for that, or project director, but of course, without any budget. Okay, so that meant that we're going to have to ask for volunteers. And so it was a little bit of a interesting campaign trying to get people interested in volunteering to go up on their own dime and to help work to bring it turned out a couple, but a barrack down to excuse me, to the museum. So I think that in a way, I think just visually to have that down in at the museum is probably it's an important thing.
Nancy, did you encounter any opposition or conflict in that process?
Yeah, I think there was some pushback among some people in our community even, and maybe partly because it was funding, I don't know. But actually, when we were up at in Wyoming, we had gone up there to lay our groundwork. I mean, you know, you just don't go into a community and all that. First, we had to identify what might be available, and we had the good works in spirit of Bacon Sakatani, who identified a couple of barracks. And so with his recommendation, we had a little committee that we worked to think in terms of then the house, and then, you know, had to go up there and do some outreach work. Went there maybe about 3 times so that the community up there also could appreciate that we were going to come to take a barrack from their midst, and Wise and all of that. And, you know, strangely, that project also laid the groundwork towards the beginning of the Heart Mountain Wyoming Foundation, which the local people started to develop and organize.
So this is typical Nancy, so efficient. You answered 2 questions, because the second question was from Sharon Yamato, the writer of Moving Walls.
Oh, hi Sharon. Yeah.
She was asking, you know, you just smoothly went into her question, which was asking about, you know, about your story of the barracks and did you face any opposition. So thank you. Perfect answer for 2 people. Richard, do you have any questions like that? What was your favorite contribution to JANM?
Well, you know, when I was a docent, I used to talk to people, and then I talk about what happened in the history. And then I said to myself, you know what? I'm history, because I lived part of that about 50 years ago. Because I don't remember when we were in high school, we talked about the World War I, and that was only less than 50 years, you know, when I was in school. So I said, you know, I'm part of history. And so I try to impart whatever I knew and my experience of what happened to us. I'd really like to talk about the Japanese American history, and especially how the Issei's made what, you know, made it easier for us, how much they suffered, everything else. So I'm really talking about the history, and that's the part of what imparting that to the community is what I think, to me, it was really important.
And that's an interesting point, because when the museum started, you know, we were doing tours with Bill Shishima, Mas Masumoto, and Hal Kamey. They were our first 3 docents, but we never realized how integral the volunteers would become in sharing that story. To now they're just hundreds that serve as our docents, and it really is an integral part of how we tell the story. So yeah, that's a great answer. And sorry, there's so much activity in the chat. Sometimes we're looking down. I think I see Nancy reading the chat too. There's just so much comments. So we appreciate your participation, and it makes this work fun. There is a question here from the infamous Ken Mochizuki, author from Northwest, and it's to Nancy. And he's asking, when talking about the vigilante incident in Utah, that has that ever been seized upon as proof that the camps existed for your protection?
I think that particular incident was so specifically to our family. You know, it was because in the area that we lived outside of Utah, there wasn't a Japanese community per se, and we were there because of some farming equipment that my dad had to go and retrieve from the Keatley Farms, who closed down after a year. And so in retrieving his equipment, he leased this land. And so I think, you know, there was no other Japanese or Asians or living around us. And so I don't think, I think it was just very specific to our family. I hope I answered the question. You know, if it is about vigilante activities, I don't know of any other within that time frame.
Yeah, no, I think it does. It's interesting because I'm always, when I recall that story, I'm always impressed at the independence and the courage that your father had to have to kind of just step out there and just say, you know, we're gonna make a go at it. And then the resulting sort of, you know, maybe it was a little too soon, and how quickly you had to change direction. So it wasn't probably in a major, it wasn't in a visible area, because we know that having gone to Topaz, there's no Emily Anderson's always asking, like, how did they get fish out here? There's no roads to get to get the fish here. So for Richard, I have a question. You know, you talked about your father and how, you know, how he never said that he loved you. I'm just curious, have you grown from that? Have you changed? Have you done anything differently than your father?
Yeah, I did. I think it was about 3 years ago. We have a family get together, you know, during the holidays, and with one New Year's, I told the whole family that I'm a Murakami man, and I know I never told everybody I love you. So I told them what I thought about them, and a couple of the nieces came to me and said thank you, because I know I never said that. See, one of the things that in our family, you know, when we're in camp, and then most of my life, I had an older brother, but my older brother never lived with us except after he came back from Japan for about a year and a half, 2 years. But I was like the Nissan. So I helped my siblings grow up. But one thing I never did was to tell them what to do. I let them make their own decisions. If they come and ask me a question, then I would answer. But otherwise, I never told them what to do. And happily, all my brothers and sisters, you know, grew up well. I owed a lot of that to my mother, and it's a long story, but you know, but my mother was a wise woman. So with that, I'll stop with.
Yes, I mean, when I as I was researching this project and just even thinking about questions, I realized that too. All the women in my life it's always been strong women like Nancy, Irene. You look at Sybil Jordan Hampton, and just all these influences on my life. A majority have been women. So.
Yeah, but also, Clement, when you think about that, who are the people that really came up and discovered a lot of things? Women, right?
Yep.
And some people haven't read Years of Infamy, then the author of that, she had a lot to do with that. You know, you know, women has been somebody has really told all of us of what really happened.
And I'm sure if Kristen Hayashi is watching, she's stressing out because there's just too many women. she's doing she's doing an exhibition on women's voices, and I'm sure this is just adding to her, compounding her problems of trying to find who she's going to tell stories of. Okay, so there's another question here from Emily Anderson, and this one is for Nancy. And it says, one of the things that you did, I appreciated so much, was about the nuances of community and disagreements. What were some of the toughest tensions to deal with for you?
Oh dear, you want the warts, huh? Okay. Oh dear. Well, well, oh dear. Yeah, I mean, there's always, always when you get human beings together, and there's such diversity. But in some ways, I think I was fortunate that my mother really, one of the things that I really learned from her, even though there were times that I was rebelling against it, especially if I wanted her to take my side, she'd always say, okay, now look at the other side, that's any kind of disagreement or any problem or any kind of interactions, there's always several sides. It's not just two sides. And I know as a young person, when you were just so passionate about your point of view, but then here's this mother saying, okay, now take a deep breath and look at the other side. I used to hate that. But that became kind of a training. So to work within community, to really appreciate that there are points of view, and somehow then how do you work through that to come to a decision? Well, it is a process and a struggle, and Irene gave me the opportunity to face several big ones like that, and we went through a couple of them.
Almost weekly.
Yes, weekly.
There's a comment from Ken Mochitsuki in here about saying with the infamous scary quotes. What I meant, Ken, was that you're a very famous person in our community. So just to be clear.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going back and forth between the chat and sort of my smartphone, looking at all the different questions. There's another one from Floyd Morey.
Oh, Floyd. Hello, Floyd.
He didn't know that you lived in Utah, but he was curious what town was nearby, as you stated that there were no AAPI around you, whereas Salt Lake City was pretty heavily populated.
Yeah, we were nowhere near. Salt Lake City was somewhere, but we were in between. We were much closer to Delta. I think the township, it wasn't the town of Spanish Fork that I went to school in. It was another small town, but I can't remember exactly the name, but it'd be more in the middle part going towards Delta that we were in.
Okay.
Oh, there was a place called American Fork as well. So maybe if, as a person living in Utah, you might kind of get a sense of where our family was at that time.
Okay. So I think we're a little bit over. So what I'm going to ask now is, does anybody have any final thoughts about pilgrimages and sort of virtual pilgrimage, and where do we go from here? Richard?
At first I would not go to pilgrimages. All right, I wouldn't even go to reunions. Because I already lived in every camp 1 year. But once I started going to pilgrimage, I I'm one of those guys that thinks that every volunteer at JANM should go to one pilgrimage. Many of them go to Manzanar, but I think they should go to either Harmonton or to Tootie Lake. And there's one in Poston coming up. They should attend at least one pilgrimage, because I think you'll learn a great deal from going to them. So I really believe in pilgrimages now. And I was going to go to Tootie Lake this year, and who's probably my last one. But anyway, I really believe in pilgrimages. You learn a lot, and you get to speak to a lot of people. So I really believe in them.
Okay, Nancy?
Well, I think I'm with Richard in the sense that going to pilgrimages and just taking part within and listening, really listening to some of the discussions and all of that, it's really, it's a very important activity that one can, learn a lot from. But I think importantly, by going to pilgrimages and learning what you learn, it's really, I really think that it's also a time for us to reflect on that, to see what is happening among us right now, and to be able to kind of pull it all kind of the understanding of the past and what's going on today, and hoping that we're able to contribute, as a community, as an individual, to make this into a better place than how we are or where we've been. I'm not saying this very well, but because you throw these questions at us, Clement. But I really think that I'm very hopeful that there's a lot of thinking and that's going on right now in the times that we live, that there be ideas and actions that come out to really go to become a much more equitable place,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So I want to thank both of you. When I think of Nancy, I think of Family Expo and the Salute to Veterans.
No.
If you can imagine some individual coordinating a family expo for Japanese Americans at the LA Convention Center, it had to come from a brain like Nancy Araki's brain, because it was so unbelievable to think that you would bring hundreds of community groups to present in an expo format.
Hey, there's the Irene Hiranos, there's a whole curatorial team, and there's, the marketing team and the development group and all of that. Really, Clement?
Wait, I'm not done yet.
Oh.
Yeah, that was my first one, and I said, wow.
Yeah, there's still the All Camp Summit.
Yeah.
There's Camp Connections, which you saw. There was the Who's America, Who's American, the 5 state conference. There was the Speaking Up, the Northwest, where there was with the Idaho, Seattle, and Oregon, in Tule Lake and all Minidoka and all those, that conference as well. So, your track record speaks volumes. You have done so much. So for that, again, for me, it's about mentorship. To see what you're able to accomplish only inspires me. Same thing with the volunteers, Richard. You're retired, but you work tirelessly at what you do with passion. So we work hard because you guys, it's the Japanese American guilt. You're making us work.
That's right.
You guys work so hard. So I want to close by saying one, that this weekend, this weekend, the last weekend, it's clear that in spite of 9 weeks of amazing work, and thanks to Kimiko Hanako and Aaron and Royce, that there's still lots of work to do. I mean, some of the
Yes.
programs yesterday talking about H-140, issues of Okinawa displacement and their histories being lost, stories of LGBTQ communities, mixed race, just so many issues that we still need to be told. I'm reminded of what Nobuko Miyamoto said yesterday, that this is not a war. There's not an end. There's not a victory, but it's a constant struggle, and it's something that we have to continually fight and push for. Good times, bad times, maybe even more in good times, because sometimes in good times we become lax, but it's clear that things can turn on a dime. And then the second thought is, comes from Nancy, and it's this ideal of collective histories. She mentioned that in her talk, and it's clear in her work that the goal is really to get as many of the voices to participate. Not just one group or not, XYZ people, but all people, even people beyond, like John Ellington from Arkansas. I do have to shout out all the Arkansas people that are in our viewing too.
Yes.
Richard Yada and his family. So thank you, Arkansas people, for participating. And it just goes to show you sort of Nancy's reach on people nationally. And we do have to just, so this idea of collective history, that, our story is never complete until all of those voices have been documented and put into this canon of the Japanese American experience, which is really just an American experience. And so, I know that the one bad part about this whole program today was that, we mentioned so many people that have now gone on, like David and Margaret Masaoka, Jean Hamamoto, who was the person who couldn't go to the campsites during the 1994, the 2004 project, because for her it was too deep. It was hurting too much. To Irene Hirano, and even all so many people. So as we go on for the rest of the day, we should keep all those people in our minds and think, good thoughts and thankful thoughts, and continue to do this work of talking to our mentors and documenting their histories. So with that, I want to say thank you all for coming. And everybody, Richard and Nancy, we can all say goodbye to everybody.
Bye.